I can't breathe, cried the Zulu. When he lifted the cloth, his heart stopped cold. Snow swallowed the sound before anyone else heard her. The wind tore along the riverbank, lifting white sheets from the frozen current and smashing them against the piled logs. Men shouted somewhere in the blur, their voices swallowed by the saws and the river ice groaning. Only Caleb heard the muffled cry beneath the canvas staked beside the log deck. I can't breathe. The words were thin, strangled, almost carried off by the wind. He stopped mid-stride, boots sliding on packed snow. For a moment he thought it was the river ice cracking some warped echo. Then again, closer, barely a whisper beneath the flapping canvas. I can't breathe. He dropped the coil of rope from his shoulder and lunged toward the sound. Snow hammered his face. The canvas, stretched over a low frame, snapped and bellied as the wind pummeled it. This was where they kept the surplus gear and the immigrant supplies, he thought. Boxes, sacks, tools. No one should be inside. Hold on, he shouted, voice rough with cold. Hold on, I hear you. His fingers, numbed through his mittens, fumbled at the ice-stiffened edge. The canvas had frozen to the ground, trapped under a ridge of snow and thaw and snow again. He braced one boot, hooked his hands under the seam, and heaved. For a moment nothing moved. Then the frozen edge tore free with a crack like brittle bone splitting. The cloth lifted. The smell hit him first. Not rot, not yet. Damp wool, cold iron, stale breath trapped too long. Beneath the canvas lay a cramped low space, dim as a burrow, lit only by the gray winter light that slipped along the ground. In that dimness he saw a shape struggling, the jerk of shoulders, the desperate lift of a chest against ropes. Her face was wrapped. A strip of rough gray cloth, like a torn blanket, was tied across her mouth and nose. Her eyes stared out above it, wide and dark, the whites shockingly bright against her skin. Frost glittered on her lashes. Every breath she fought for came out as a small, animal sound behind the cloth. His heart misfired in his chest. For a second he didn't see the woman at all. He saw his brother's face, 13 and blue-lipped, flailing under river ice long ago. Saw the little hands beating the underside of the frozen sheet. Saw his own reflection in his father's boots and how no one moved until it was too late. God. He rasped, dropping to his knees. God, I've got you. Her eyes rolled toward him. She tried to speak. The words were lost in the cloth. He jammed clumsy fingers at the knot behind her head. The fabric had been yanked tight, the knot tucked under her hair, frozen solid with her breath. His gloves were too thick. He tore them off with his teeth, spat them aside, and dug bare fingers under the knot. The cold bit him clean to the bone. She jerked again, chest heaving. Her hands were bound in front of her, wrists scraped raw where the rope cut. Her ankles, he saw, were tied to the crate she sat on, a rough packing box with foreign letters burned into it. Her breath wheezed against the cloth. Each sound was weaker than the last. Please, she tried again, the words strangled. I know, he muttered. I know, girl, hold on. He forced his fingers beneath the frozen knot and pulled. The ice cracked. His nails tore and one split back to the quick pain lancing up his arm. He grunted and wrenched the knot loose. The cloth slackened, then sagged. He lifted it away from her mouth. Her lips were swollen, cracked and darkened by the cold. She gulped air in fast, ragged pulls, each breath a shudder that shook her whole body. Then she coughed, the sound tearing through the little space beneath the canvas, raw and desperate. He stared. Beneath the cloth, along the line of her throat, shadows bloomed. Not just bruises from this gagging. Raised ridges, pale and roped, wrapped around her neck like a cruel necklace. Old scars. Rope scars? Someone had tried to choke the life from her before the snow, before this camp. Long before she was bound in this stash of forgotten supplies, Caleb felt something inside him go. Dark and still. The rest of her came into focus slowly. Her skin, deep brown and ash-dulled by the cold. Her hair, thick and tightly curled, matted where it was damp with sweat and frozen where tears had run and turned to ice. She wore a man's cast-off shirt under a rough wool coat too thin for this latitude. The coat gaped at the neck, and there the scars glared at him, crossing, overlapping, some old, some newer. She saw his gaze and flinched, instinctive. her shoulders pulling in as far as the ropes allowed. He pulled his eyes away, jaw clenching. He reached for the rope at her wrists. "Easy," he said, voice low now, as if speaking to a skittish horse. "I'm taking these off." Her breath still came too fast, but she nodded once. Cold burned his fingers as he worked the knot. Whoever tied her had done it with care. The hitch, meant to hold long, meant to hurt. He felt anger rise in him, slow and heavy like sap warming in a spring tree. "Who did this?" he asked without looking up. She swallowed, wincing, and her voice came small, roughened. "The man with the red scarf?" Caleb paused for half a heartbeat. Red scarf. There were only so many Englishmen in this camp, only so many that wore color loud in the snow. The image came at once, a thick neck wrapped in wool, the color of spilled berries, a wide grin missing 2 teeth, hands that never stopped moving when he talked. "Foster," Caleb muttered. He felt her studying him. "You know him?" He nodded once, sharply. "He hires and fires half the month. Thinks the river belongs to him, too." The last knot slipped. Her wrists came free, trembling as she pulled them to her chest and rubbed at the raw grooves. He leaned down to work at her ankles, the rope stiff and ice-burned. "How long have you been here?" he asked. She stared past him toward the slit of gray daylight. "Day, maybe 2. A pause. "Hard to know in dark." 2 days trussed like game under a canvas sheet while the camp stamped past, shouting and swearing, boots throwing snow. He cursed it under his breath, a quiet word that steamed the air between them. Why not scream louder? He asked the question out before he could tame it. She lifted a brow, that small motion oddly proud. "You think they don't hear?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "They hear. They don't open." He stopped working at the rope for a moment and met her eyes. There were no tears there now. Just steady, exhausted anger. It hit him harder than any begging would have. The last rope slipped loose from her ankles. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled at once. He caught her under the arms, feeling how light she was, how the bones of her shoulders pressed through the fabric. "Slow," he said. "Your blood's like sap, thick from sitting." She managed half a smile at that, brief and crooked. "Sap," she echoed. He eased her out from under the canvas, into the full white of the riverbank morning. The cold slapped both of them, sharp as a board. She inhaled once, sharply, as the air struck her lungs clean. Then she shuddered hard. The camp moved around them, half blind. Men shouldered peavies and swore about knots in timber. A teamster cursed his horses near the sled road. No one turned. No one saw the thin woman in the stolen coat, leaning against Caleb's side as if her knees might not remember their work. He pulled off his own outer coat without thinking and swung it around her shoulders. The cold punched him a moment later, biting his damp shirt. He ignored it. She grabbed the front of the coat as if afraid someone would rip it away. "You'll freeze," she said. "I've had worse." He replied, doubt it was true. He'd slept back to back with death before, on spruce boughs soaked in meltwater, with only a wet blanket and a dull knife for comfort. You lasted or you didn't, that was the river rule. Still, the cold ate at him immediately, sliding fingers down his spine. "What's your name?" He asked. She hesitated, then answered. "Nolwazi." The word curled on his tongue, unfamiliar, almost musical. He tried it once. "Nolwazi, he said carefully. That drew a clearer spark in her eyes. "You are close." "Close as all the forest gives," he said. Then he jerked his chin toward the bunkhouse. "Come, you need heat. Heat and food and someone to look at those bruises without thinking of how much she was worth if sold again." Along the river roots. She didn't move. Her hand tightened on the coat, and her bare feet, in boots too big for her, dug into the drift. "If he sees," she whispered. Caleb followed her glance toward the office shack. Smoke limped from the stovepipe. Foster would be in there somewhere, counting tallies, spitting tobacco into the same bucket he used for nails. "He'll see," Caleb said. "And he'll answer." Nolwazi shook her head, fiercely now. "You don't understand. He has papers." She searched for the word. "Contract. I am his until river melts. Maybe longer." The anger in him found a clearer shape. He could see it now. Some coastal port deal, some crooked shipping agreement. ink on a page that counted her as load not life. She would have been brought north like cargo, cheaper than hiring local women to cook or wash. And Foster, with his easy laugh and red scarf, would show the papers and say it was legal. Papers burn, Caleb said quietly. They burn like all else. She studied him, measuring. You would fight him. It wasn't quite a question. He looked toward the office, then toward the bunkhouse, where the door stood half open, warm air leaking out, carrying the smell of stewed beans and damp socks. I'd rather cut logs, he admitted. Trees don't lie. Men do. Then leave me, she said, voice suddenly hard. Go cut your trees. The words should have stung. Instead, they landed heavy and familiar. He knew that bitterness, had worn it once after his brother went under and no one moved fast enough. He had told his father to go back to his beer and leave the river. The river had taken what it wanted. The problem, Caleb said slowly, is that I heard you? She blinked. If I walk away now, he continued, choosing each word like a log for the river drive, it'll be my hands tying that cloth again. Might as well be. Wind dragged a curtain of snow between them in the office. For a moment the camp blurred, the shouts distant. Nolwazi watched him, something softening behind the hardness in her gaze. You talk like a priest, she said. He snorted. Priest never swung an axe. I have. She almost smiled at that dot. He took a breath, felt the cold scrape his lungs, and made a choice so small no one else in the camp would see it. He shifted his stance, putting his body between her and the office door, as if that alone could change the river of events already flowing. Inside, he said. Food. Then we see what the red scarf thinks he owns. She hesitated only a heartbeat, then nodded. They moved together toward the bunkhouse porch, boots thudding on the packed snow. Each step pulled them deeper into the camp's blind circle of noise and work. Into the path of the man who thought a human throat was just another place to put a rope. Behind them, the canvas they had lifted flapped in the wind, its frozen edge beating a slow, stubborn rhythm against the crate where the rope still lay, empty now. Curling like shed snakeskins on the snow, the bunkhouse door sagged on its hinges, old wood swollen from years of steam and sweat. Caleb pushed it open with his shoulder and a draft of cold air rolled inside, dragging snow with it. The heat from the iron stove hit him like a fist, wet and thick, laced with the smell of boiled beans, wool, and unwashed men. Heads turned at once. 8. 10 men sat along the rough plank tables, hunched over tin bowls and black coffee. A few were pulling damp socks toward the stove, others sharpening axes with slow, patient strokes. The talking died the moment Nolwazi stepped in behind him, the hem of the borrowed coat nearly brushing the floor. Silence settled, heavy as snow on a spruce bough. A spoon clinked against a bowl. Someone cleared his throat. Near the stove, old Garan squinted over his pipe, smoke curling from the corners of his mouth, eyes shifting from Caleb to Nolwazi and back again. Caleb felt the room weigh him. It always did when anything new crossed the threshold. A strange man, a broken tool, a rumor. This was more than any of that. This was a woman, dark-skinned and slight, clutching his coat around her as if it were the last dry shelter in a flood. She ain't supposed to be in here, one of the younger fellas muttered. Caleb ignored him. He guided Nolwazi toward the corner nearest the stove, where the heat radiated in waves. Her steps were small, measured, as if she expected the floorboards themselves to give way. He pulled a stool over with his boot and gestured. Sit. Warm your feet. She sat, moving like someone who had learned to make herself small out of habit. The coat gaped at the neck, and Garan's gaze snagged on the pale scars crossing her throat. Something flickered in the old man's eyes, then died quiet. Caleb ladled stew from the pot on the stove into a tin bowl, thick with beans and slivers of salt pork. He set it in front of her along with a hunk of bread. Her hands hovered above it, hesitant, as if it might vanish at any second. Eat, he said. She lifted the spoon with a trembling hand and drew the first mouthful in. Steam fogged the air before her face. She closed her eyes, breathing the heat, then swallowed. The second spoonful came faster, then the third. Soon the spoon clinked against the side of the bowl in a steady rhythm. Spoon, breath, swallow. Around them, Conversation crawled back in fits. Where'd she come from? Must be one of Foster's. I heard he had 3 on the last sled. 1 for the cookhouse. 1 for... Shut it, Garan said mildly. Without raising his voice, they shut it. Caleb leaned his hip against the table edge. Heat biting through his trousers where the stove's glow hit. His shirt already stuck to his back. Without his coat he felt undressed, but he didn't reach for it. He watched Nolwazi's hands instead. The way she gripped the spoon, ready to drop it if someone barked. The way her knuckles whitened when a laugh cracked too loud from the far side of the room. The way she flinched when the bunkhouse door slammed again behind another man's entrance. She finished the stew faster than he thought she would. She scraped the bowl with a piece of bread, chasing every smear of grease, every stray bean. When she was done, she pressed the spoon down, steadying it, and her shoulders dropped a fraction. Not relaxed. Just less braced for impact. Thank you, she said softly, not quite looking up at him. Caleb nodded. There's more if you... The door banged open again, hard enough to rattle the stovepipe. Wind shoved snow inside in a white burst. Over it came a laugh he knew too well. Blowin' like an Englishman's promises out there. Foster roared, stomping snow from his boots. Cold and loud, and... He broke off. His gaze swept the bunkhouse, snagged on the unfamiliar shape by the stove, and narrowed. The red wool scarf looped twice around his neck blazed against the dull winter, damp with melted snow. He unwrapped it slowly, never taking his eyes off Nolwazi. Well, he said, voice dropping. Seems someone's been shopping in the company's stores. Nolwazi stiffened on the stool. Her fingers found the edge of Caleb's coat and clenched. Caleb straightened, pushing away from the table. Foster's eyes flicked to him, amusement quirking one corner of his mouth. Caleb, my steady oak, Foster said. Didn't think you were the type to go rummaging under tarps. Found more than tools, Caleb replied. Foster stepped further inside, swinging the door shut behind him. The wind cut off like a knife. He peeled off his gloves, finger by finger, slow and deliberate, dropping them on the table as he passed. Aye, that you did, he said. You found my property. The word dropped into the heat like a stone in slush. Caleb heard Nolwazi's breath hitch beside him. He kept his eyes on Foster. Funny kind of property, he said. Craves air. Free hands. Doesn't stack well. A few men shifted in their seats, glancing between them. Most stayed quiet. It wasn't their fight. Not yet. Foster's smile widened, all teeth and no warmth. It's not for stacking, lad. She's domestic help. Company asset. Signed and sealed in Durban and Halifax both. I've got the papers to show for it if you can read more than tree rings. Nolwazi's jaw tightened at the name of the southern port. Caleb saw it. Felt that word settle like grit in his own chest. Durban, far off. Warm. A place. Neither snow nor these men belonged. I can read, Caleb said simply. Then you know ink makes things tidy, Foster said. He flipped a hand as if brushing sawdust from the air. Contracts. Passage agreements, indentures, all neat. He tipped his chin toward Nolwazi. You, get up. You're not to be in here with the men. Company rules. She didn't move. Caleb saw the war on her face fear and something else. Pride, maybe. Stubbornness. The instinct to obey fought the memory of the ropes on her wrists. She tightened one hand in the fabric of his coat. So small a motion anyone else might have missed it. Caleb didn't. She was gagged and tied under a frozen tarp, he said. That in your papers too? Murmurs scraped through the room like chairs shifting. Foster's eyes cooled. Discipline, he said. She bolted yesterday. Tried for the tree line like a spooked mare. Can't have that. We're too far from anything out here. His eyes flicked over Nolwazi. Run into the woods dressed like that, she'd be dead in an hour. I was doing her a kindness, letting the temper run out in a safe place. Safe, Caleb repeated softly. I heard her choking. Foster shrugged, unbothered. She's breathing now, isn't she? No harm done. Now, hand over my coat, girl, and I'll see you back where you're meant to be. Every man in the bunkhouse saw the choice then. It hung in the thick air between stove and door, between Foster's easy authority and Caleb's quiet weight. Caleb didn't move at first. The cold from outside still clung to his shirt. His fingers ached where the knots had cut them. He thought of his brother again, trapped under the ice, small hands beating for a help that didn't come. If he stepped aside now, this was the same. Just slower. Nolwazi's gaze climbed toward him, searching his face. Some last reserve fell away from her eyes. She looked tired to the bone. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with the winter. "I don't go back," she said suddenly, voice ringing clearer than before. Foster laughed once. "You don't get to decide, girl." Caleb spoke without looking away from Foster. "She just did." Goran shifted his pipe. The scrape of the stem against his teeth was very loud. "Careful, boy," he muttered. Just loud enough for Caleb to hear. "This ain't your first river. You know how it runs." "I know what it takes," Caleb replied. Foster took a step closer, scarf dangling from one hand, red wool twisting like a loosened noose. "You forget who keeps this camp on its feet?" He asked. "Who signs the tally sheets the company reads? Who talks for you to the board downriver? You're paid because I say the logs moved fast enough. You eat because I sign." Caleb's jaw worked. "We eat because we cut," he said. "Because the river takes what we feed it. And who chooses the hands that cut?" Foster shot back. "Me. Not you. Me. And right now one of those hands," he jabbed a finger at Nolwazi, "belongs to my household on a 3-year indenture. I fronted her passage across half the world. She pays it back in work." "That's law?" "Law." Caleb asked quietly. "In whose tongue?" "British, boy." Foster's lip curled. "Same that gives you this land to swing your axe in." "I've yet to see the law haul a log through slush," Caleb said. He knew he was pushing too far. The line had been drawn and he was crossing it, boot by boot. He could feel the room tilt around him. Men leaned forward, breath held, eyes tense. This was more than a quarrel over a rope now. This was open defiance of the man who might send them all packing come spring. "Move aside," Foster said. The warmth had drained from his voice. "Last warning." Caleb's hand moved, slow and calm, to rest on the back of Nolwazi's stool. He could feel her shiver through the wood. "No," he said. The word hung there, small and unadorned. It put his whole life out on the thin ice between them. For a stretched heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Foster's hand twitched toward Caleb's chest. Not a punch yet, just the beginning of one. Caleb saw it start, the muscle flex in the forearm. The way Foster shifted weight off his left heel. He moved first. He didn't swing. Didn't reach for the axe propped near the door. He stepped in, closing the space, and lifted one hand up between them like he might calm an angry horse. "Think," he said, voice low enough that the nearest men had to strain to hear. "You lay hand on me, this room splits. Half the crew walks, half stays, the river jam comes, and the company wants a head for the mess. They'll pick yours, not mine. I'm cheaper to keep." Foster froze, nostrils flaring. Caleb went on, steady. "You haul her outside now, kicking and screaming, gag like you had her. And what happens when word reaches the mission downriver? The magistrate. They've grown soft on this. Papers or no, they don't like the sound of women choking for breath in a lumber camp." Foster sneered. "You think any magistrate's riding out here in winter?" "Maybe not," Caleb allowed. "But spring comes. So do inspectors. Company men who don't like scandal near their ledgers. I talk plain when they ask. So do others. You going to gag us all too?" The room shifted. Men who had been silent now found their backs straightening. A few met Foster's eye, then looked away, but the message hung there. They'd heard. They'd seen the rope marks on Nolwazi's wrists. Witnesses, willing or not. Foster's gaze flicked around the room, quick and sharp, weighing each man. He saw what Caleb did. Some loyal, some indifferent, some eager for any excuse to strike back against the man who docked pay for dull saws and late starts. The red scarf dangled from his hand. Trembling slightly. "You want to save her?" he asked Caleb finally. "Fine. Buy her contract." "You've got that much put aside, do you?" 3 years hard labor, passage, and my trouble. Caleb's gut went cold in a different way. Money. Of course. He shook his head once. You know what we're paid, he said. The wages dribbled through his fingers every year like meltwater, tools, food, a bottle at Christmas for the crew. The rest he hoarded in a box under his bunk. Meant one day to buy a patch of land that wasn't half rock and pine. Foster smiled, sensing the shift. Then you're arguing with the weather, not me. She's mine by law and ledger. Drop this and I'll forget your little show here. Push it, and I'll have you off company land before the week's out. Plenty of men want your place on the river. Exile, no letter of recommendation. No work with any big camp within 300 miles. Back to odd jobs and winter hunger. He'd clawed his way to steady work over 10 years of cold and splintered knuckles. He knew how hard it would be to start again. Nolwazi's hand loosened on his coat. He felt it slip. It's all right, she whispered, so low he barely heard. You did enough, go. The words cut cleaner than any axe. He looked down at her. The scars on her throat had faded from angry purple to a duller shade as the heat worked into her skin. Her eyes, though, were bright. There was something like mercy there. Mercy for him, as if she didn't want to be the weight that broke his life's thin ice. He thought of his brother. Of the way his father had stood on the riverbank afterward, bottle hanging from limp fingers, saying, I couldn't reach. I couldn't swim that fast. I did enough. The river takes. Enough, Caleb said softly, tasting the word. He knew now how bitter it truly was. He turned back to Foster. You want coin, he said. I'll get you coin. Foster snorted. From where? Your tree stump savings? From trees, Caleb said. His voice firmed. Your winter quota's short. Everyone knows it. River ice came early. Jammed half your last drive. The board downriver will skin you for it. He jerked his chin toward the stacked log deck visible through the bunkhouse window, a dark mass against the white. You want her work. You want mine. You want this camp kept out of the board's teeth? You give me until thaw to pay you off in timber. Foster's eyes narrowed. That timber already belongs to the company. Then you lose nothing, Caleb countered. You get your full tally instead of half, and your hide stays whole. You can lie and say you disciplined her in some softer way, and no inspector smells smoke? He leaned in, lowering his voice further. You bet against me once, Foster, when you said that bend in the river would jam this fall. I cleared it, alone, night and day. You remember? He did. Caleb could see it in the flicker behind the man's eyes. That jam had almost cost them the season. Caleb had gone out on the shifting logs with a pike, shoulders burning, boots slipping, knowing one misstep meant he'd vanish under green water and not come back. He'd cleared it, driving the key logs free while the rest of the men watched from shore, too wary to follow. Foster's tongue wetted his lip. Greed and caution wrestled on his face. One season, Caleb said. One, you keep your hands off her. No rope, no gag. You keep her fed enough to stand. She works where she chooses, not under your boot. End of thaw, you get the numbers you need, and I walk with her and those papers in my hand. Or I go downriver ahead of you with what I saw today and let the board weigh it. Foster stared at him as if measuring the thickness of ice beneath them both. You threatening me with my own crew? He asked. I'm telling you what's there, Caleb replied. Like pointing out a rotten tree before you build your house under it. Silence again. Only the pop of the stove and the faint whistle of wind at the eaves. Finally, Foster looked away. Not far. Just to the side, to the window where the snow still fell in soft, relentless sheets. One season, he said slowly. And if you fall short, if those piles aren't high enough to make the board forget this talk, I take what's mine with interest. Her, you, anyone who thinks your tongue is worth listening to. Caleb nodded once. One season. Foster snapped the red scarf back around his neck, each loop tight and sharp. He shot Nolwazi a look that promised future accounting. Then turned toward the door. We're not done, he said over his shoulder. We are for today. Caleb answered. The door slammed behind Foster, jerking on its tired hinges. The wind howled in again for a heartbeat, then cut off. The room exhaled. Someone let out a low whistle. Another muttered, You're mad, Calder, using the old mispronunciation of his name. No one moved closer yet. They watched him like they'd watch a man who'd stepped out onto a logjam in freshet, Half expecting him to vanish, Garan tamped his pipe, eyes narrowed. You just hitched your fate to every tree in this valley, he said. Caleb's mouth twisted. Was already hitched, he replied. Just tighten the knot. He turned to no Lwizi. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't name. Not gratitude. Not yet. Something more sober. An understanding that what he'd done wasn't rescue, not fully. It was a wager. On his back, on the river, on the slim decency of men who counted wood more closely than lives. What did you do? She asked quietly. He considered the question. I bought time, he said. That's all any of us ever buy out here. She absorbed that, looking past him toward the window where the snow came down in fine, endless lines. Her fingers loosened on the coat. She looked smaller in that moment, then taller, as if some weight had shifted from one shoulder to another. I will work, she said. You think I cannot? I can carry, cook, wash, mend. I worked since I was small enough they had to tie cloth around my chest to carry water. I don't doubt it, Caleb said. But this season, if I'm tying our lives to the river, I'd rather know what you choose to do, not what he picks for you. She blinked. What I choose. He nodded. It was a foreign shape of thought. He could see it in the way her brow furrowed. Choice had been a thin luxury in her life, he suspected. Offered, then snatched back. Now she waited as if afraid it might cut her fingers. Her gaze drifted toward the stove. The old iron beast belched heat and smoke, its belly full of wood some boy had split at dawn. Where do the men eat? She asked. Here, he said. And the cookhouse. We take meals in both. Depends whose turn it is to wash up afterward. And who mends their clothes? Mostly no one, Garan interjected dryly. They wear them to threads, then complain of cold. We trade the worst rags for new ones at the company store, at twice the cost they're worth. Nolwazi nodded slow. Then maybe they need someone who knows a needle. She glanced at Caleb. And someone to remind them how to sit without barking like dogs. A faint ripple of laughter moved through a few men at that. It cut the tension just enough to let them breathe. Caleb's mouth tugged in the hint of a smile. We could use that, he agreed. She lifted her chin. The motion bared the scars on her throat to the hot orange glow of the stove. They looked less like wounds in that light, more like old rope marks on a weathered tree. Then I choose that, she said. For now. For now, he echoed. In his gut, the clock for the season started ticking. Snow fell outside, each flake another second slipping away. He could feel the trees waiting in the hills, their frozen sap, their roots buried in iron-hard ground, one season to cut enough wood to purchase a life. It sounded almost reasonable when he framed it. That way, he knew better. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and comment what country you're watching from. See you in the next one.